One of the most important things that I've discovered is that when I was 22 years old and facing 15 years in prison, I didn't rat because I was a coward. That'd be the last thing I thought about on my deathbed. In order to stop hating yourself, you have to learn. If there's something you're scared of doing, just jump in, just do it. I was on the run for 3 years because I was scared to jump into that fire. I was scared to face the reality of.
A person is only as strong as their word, but every day, the world dares you to break it. Integrity with Red Shea is for the ones who refuse to do so. Red spent 12 years in federal prison because he wouldn't break his word. Now, he's talking with people who've done the same. From their battles, you'll see how to stand tall when everything around you falls. Because in a world hell-bent on destroying you, your integrity is the only thing that will protect you. This is Integrity with Red Shea.
Bryan, thank you for coming on today, my man.
It's an honor and a pleasure.
So, Bryan, you know, I like to start off all the time with my guest. Start off in telling who you are and where you came from and what you've been through in your life.
How much time we got?
Well, let's try to condense it the best we can.
I understand, yeah. So I was born in West Texas. My father was a pastor. Grew up with cowboys, cattle, guns, boots. To me, it was a perfect childhood. And then when I was 10 years old, we went to New Jersey, about 45 minutes outside of New York City. And that was a massive culture shock for me. It also planted the seeds of childhood trauma that led to me being in prison twice in my life. First for trafficking cocaine when I was 22 years old, and then when I was 32 years old for trafficking marijuana.
How many years did you do in the beginning?
I've done a total of 7 years. I've done 5.5 in the feds, and I've done 18 months in the state. So I did 5.5 when I was 22 for cocaine, and then I did 18 months.
Got it.
For marijuana. So that's my life in a nutshell. You know, if you look at the circumstances of my life, in the beginning, I don't think you would ever assume or conclude that I was going to end up in prison twice. I definitely had a lot going for me, face value, but beneath the surface, there was just so much trauma and pain, and a lot of it stemmed from my father and just my family situation, and it has taken me over 30 years to really come to grips with just everything that I've been through and how much it's impacted me. And I went on Softwood Underbelly, and I talked about how, you know, at first I was excited to go on that platform, and then I started watching a lot of people on there, and I thought, you know, what right do I have to come on here? Because the people that are on that platform have just, you know, all sorts of abuse. I mean, childhood sexual abuse, I mean, you name it. And these were innocent people. And I've come to grips with my story that ultimately I was my own worst enemy all along. Sure. So I don't know how my story can help someone who's been through that sort of childhood trauma and childhood abuse. But I guess the power of my story is what to do if you wake up one day and you look in the mirror and you realize that you've been your own worst enemy all along. And one of the most important things that I've discovered is that you can never hate yourself into loving yourself. And in order to stop hating yourself, you have to learn how to forgive yourself. And I think learning how to forgive yourself is probably one of the hardest things that you can do in your life, but it's also the most powerful. And it really is the seed to building a positive identity and just having a positive outlook on life.
Well, it's funny you say that about loving yourself and learning to love yourself, and that comes with respecting yourself and realizing who you are really in deep inside. And I had a guest on the other day, and I said that to him, exactly what you just said, and brought up that analogy, and I said to him, you learn to love yourself. And that's extremely important, to take yourself away from negativity and put yourself in a positive light in life.
Yeah. Well, that was the reason why moving from Texas to New Jersey was so traumatic was in Texas, my father was a pastor. We didn't have money, but it didn't matter. We lived in the church parsonage. It was in a nice part of town. It was a small shithole town in West Texas, so you didn't need much money to be considered wealthy anyway. We had a membership to the country club, and so I knew we didn't have money, but it didn't matter. I had all of these external societal cues of who I was. I had a place in the community. And then when we went to New Jersey, the only thing that mattered was money. And those kids, I didn't think that they were anything better than me. I didn't think they were smarter than me. Didn't think they were better looking than me. They surely were not tougher than me. But yet it was the first time in my life that I felt inferior. And I felt inferior because we didn't have money. So we didn't have, I didn't have those external cues to tell me that I had value and tell me that I had worth. And that's what made me so obsessed with money for so long. And if you think about it, an individual that's willing to risk their life and their freedom to make money, there are some deep-seated issues there. I don't have the craziest.
I'm in that same boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I don't have the craziest story, but I mean, I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm downplaying it. When I tell it to normal people, they think it's crazy. But, I've been through some pretty hectic situations where a normal person would have said, this is not worth my life and this is not worth my freedom. But yet, if you don't have an identity, you really don't have anything and you have nothing to live for. And so money was my identity for so long. So it's not that I was really risking my freedom or my life. It was that in my mind, without that money and without that identity, I didn't have anything. It was, what was my freedom and what was my life worth if I didn't have that identity?
Yeah, well, for me, it was a little different. I get where you're coming from 100%. But for me, it was, I wanted to be somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to take myself out of the rum or the rut that I was living in. And I wanted to be somebody, whether that was a professional boxer that became a world champion, or that was a successful person as an entrepreneur, or somebody who had plenty of money that could better themselves. And I get where you're coming from. I do. But for me, it was always, I wanted to be somebody. And I remember the Boston Herald, when I was a young man, writing an article about me going in boxing and getting ready to try a shot for the U.S. boxing team in the Olympics. And in that article, in that very, very specific article with the Boston Herald, and I still have that article, is that I say at such a young age, I'm doing this because I love it, but at the same time, I want to be somebody in life.
What do you think steered you wrong?
Well, the boxing game can be a very negative game also. There's a lot of pariahs, if you will. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was boxing, I was doing extremely well. I boxed with guys like Mickey Ward and Vinny Pazienza, who was just inducted into the World Boxing Hall of Fame. We fought in the same card in Atlantic City together. So, I mean, I was up there as a good boxer and I trained and boxed with the world champions of today, of before. And I was trying to make it out here in California. And there was a guy that was trying to sell pieces of me to people. Pieces of me. 25% here, 10% here, 25% there. Like I was a piece of meat. So that's why I say pariahs. So that changed the perspective for me in the boxing game and trying to move ahead. So I always had another way to do it, growing up in the streets of Southie and saying, hey, I can make money this way. Yes, it's a risk, but I can make money. So.
What do you think leads to that decision, though?
I don't know. I don't know.
Did you ever look at crime negatively, and that's something I shouldn't do? Or was growing up in Southie, was it always just a part of life?
It wasn't all of Southie, but it was definitely prevalent in where I grew up in.
Yeah, because like our positions are different. You grew up in Southie, so someone like you falling into a life of crime, it's a lot easier to kind of trace that path.
Yeah, because you're a product of your environment.
Of course. Like my father was a pastor, my mother was a teacher. There was absolutely no criminal element in my household.
So that's why I say the difference in me and trying to pull myself out of where I was coming from in that environment, as opposed to what you're saying. That's why I brought that up.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking you because I'm thinking, you know, I can remember specific moments in my life where I've had realizations about, wow, this is my thought process. This is why I made these mistakes. But I'm trying to recall, you know, was there a specific moment where there was a fork in the road and I said, you know what, I don't care? Or was it something that was just gradual? Because I was raised in a good household. I mean, I was raised to think, you know, crime is bad. You shouldn't do drugs. You shouldn't sell drugs. But it just never, you know, stuck with me. I never, it's not that I guess I didn't feel guilty about it just because it wasn't, you know, if I stole something from someone, I would feel guilty.
I think it was the, you said it yourself, you didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe the semi-poverty part of it for you, as well as it was for me. And I grew up in the same way. My mom, she didn't have anything.
Yeah.
But she supported. She raised 4 kids on her own in those days. She raised 4 children on her own. Talking about a strong woman. But that said, and by the way, I love, you know, I love all moms, but especially a single mom that raises kids on her own, that goes out and works, whether she's working on her hands and knees or just working in an office to support her children on her own.
Did she know what you were doing before you got arrested?
She did not. No, she did not. But, you know, as time went on, she seen the cars I was having and, you know, and the way I was dressing and the good stuff. And she said to me, she says, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, please, if it's bad, stop. And I said, don't worry, Mom, I'm doing well. It ain't bad. Of course, I would never tell my mother or anything like that. But so I'm trying to like relate from what you're talking about into what I experienced, because we kind of like, you know, it was the same thing in that crime and selling drugs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I like to say there's multiple ways to skin a cat. So I guess there's multiple different upbringings that still lead to a life of crime.
And there you go.
Yeah. The only difference, though, is you got out and you never went back.
Well, I didn't want to be. Well, that my story is a much larger story when it comes to that. And there was, I probably would have been back.
Yeah.
1,000% I would have been back if it wasn't for the circumstances of the people that I was associated with being FBI informants for 40 some odd years. If they were not FBI informants, I'll be very honest and very honest with the public today. And it's a blessing that it happened. I would have been back to organized crime. I would have still been organized crime, and I would have been well, I don't know if it would have been a higher position, but because I was in a position that was pretty significant, I definitely would have been back to organized crime again. 100%. 1,000%. So it was a blessing in disguise for me. that what happened because yeah, I did a lengthy bit, but it could have been a lot worse if I didn't know of. It wasn't known that these guys were FBI informants, or even if they weren't FBI informants, who knows the extent of what could have or would have happened with me later on down the road. We don't know that. We don't know, but I can tell you this much. Had I didn't find out about these guys, Whitey Bulger, Stevie Flemmy, these guys being informants for 40 some odd years, and nobody knew, if they didn't say, nobody knew, and after I get out of prison, whether they were there or not, or took off, or said, listen, we're leaving the reins to you and someone else, and then later on, during all that time, if anything transpired, later on down the road, if it all come out, then maybe I would have been facing a lot more. Maybe I wouldn't even be here today having this podcast talking to you. Absolutely not. I can guarantee you that, brother. Absolutely not. Because I was a no-nonsense person.
Did you have plans when you were in prison to go back to organized crime when you got out?
Well, in the beginning, yes.
Yeah.
But after my time in prison and all the time that I did in learning and all the stuff that come out that was exposed, I said, I'll never be another feather in a rat or a FBI agent or a DEA agent or any law enforcement agent's stepping stone or feather in their hat ever again, or even a rat. It ain't gonna happen. I will never be a feather in a rat's hat ever again. I just, I'll be honest with you, I'm so loyal and so solid about that I would rather go out in a way that I would just eliminate every one of them. Because I have a strong feeling about being a man and accepting full responsibility. I didn't want to put myself in that position after the fact, because the only one who's going to lose, yeah, they'd lose. They'd probably lose in the end, but I would lose too. In the end, it would be just like, well, this guy was supposed to be a strong guy, stand-up guy. He was a stand-up guy. And these rats, they're no longer here because of him. And he's doing life in prison. That's something heavy to think about, right?
Yeah. When I was caught at 22, the guy that I got the key from, he was already going to federal prison on an unrelated case for 6.5 years. And you know how it is in the feds, any mandatory minimum doubles. So a key is a 5-year mandatory minimum.
Right.
So if I would have told on him, he would have done 10 years. So he would have, 6.5 years was of his own accord. I had nothing to do with that case. But he would have done 10 years on top of that, and he just had a little boy. And I wish I could say that, I was brave, that, I fought myself, I had to have this just, immense strength in order to not cooperate. But for me, it's just, it wasn't even an option. It wasn't even anything that I ever could consider, because I just did not want to be a part of thinking that someone was in prison, for 10 years as a result of my actions. To
lessen your
Yeah, I wrote an article, and it was it was kind of a hook, kind of a gotcha hook to get people to read it. And it said, when I was 22 years old and facing 15 years in prison, I didn't rat because I was a coward. And the catch is, I was scared of the person that I would have to see in the mirror if I cooperated. That's ultimately what kept me, you know what I mean, from not wanting to cooperate, is that, okay, cool, maybe I could have gotten 2.5 years off, you know, my sentence. Maybe I could have never gone to prison. But, you know, prison is something that, yes, it is unbelievably painful. You definitely have trauma as a result of it. But that's something that you can work on and you can come to terms with, and you can eliminate the impact that has on you. But cooperating, knowing someone that went to prison, I just, that'd be the last thing I thought about on my deathbed. And it's just something that would haunt me for my entire life. And it would be the last thing that I thought about as I, you know, pass away from this life. And that's all. And like I said, like it wasn't even that I was brave and I was courageous and I had to have strength. I just couldn't do that. And I'll never forget, my own attorney was lying to me, telling me that I was facing 15 years when I wasn't. But it was because of who my ex-girlfriend was, you know, connected to Cartel in Mexico. And so they thought they could scare, you know, the little white boy that was in college and had too much to lose. They thought that they could scare me into cooperating. And she looked at me and she said, "You're going to do 15 years in federal prison unless you cooperate, you know, in your girlfriend's family." And it just instantly was out of my mouth. I said, "So be it." And I'll never forget the look on her face. Her mouth just dropped wide open and she looked at me. And I swear I was the first person to ever tell her no, because she didn't know what to do. And afterwards, my father called her, because I was like a really, you know, intense meeting where I left that meeting thinking I was going to do 15 years in prison. And my father called her and it was just like, you know, what are you doing? You know, he's 22 years old. He's going to college. This is his first offense. He's facing 15 years. And her response to my father was, "I got him the first opportunity to squeal like a pig, and he didn't want to take me up on it. So there's nothing else I can do for him." And that's the part that, you know, when you look at the criminal justice system and you look at all of the cooperation, I think the defense attorneys are more to blame for the corruption than anything else, because the judges break the law, the prosecutors break the law, and the police officers break the law. And the defense attorneys just sit there and say, "Oh, well, there's not much I can really do about it." Now, if you go out there and you get a high profile, expensive defense attorney, then, you know, they will go in there and they will fight for you. But for the most part, you know, the majority of people out there facing criminal convictions don't have the ability to have those kind of defense attorneys. And
would you say that they're all in bed together?
They are. So I'll never forget. So I was actually working on a criminal justice degree. I wanted to be a defense attorney, and I was working on a criminal justice degree when I was arrested. On the dean's list, had a year to go before I went to law school. And there was a part in the criminal, like literally the curriculum that I'm being taught, and it was horse trading. And horse trading is, I'm a defense attorney, I have 30 clients. And I have one client where, guess what? I've got you beat. I'm gonna get the evidence tossed in the evidentiary hearing, you know, this guy's going free. And so, but I've also got a few other people where you've got me beat dead to rights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there, I'm going to say, "Look, I'm not going to beat you up on the one case, you know what I mean, that I've got you dead to rights on. I'll make them plea, even though I could get the case tossed out. I'll make them plea, but you got to help me out with these clients over here." So each case is supposed to be an individual case. And the prosecutor should not in any way take into consideration that I beat you on this one case.
So they use everything as a bartering tool.
Yeah, so it's literally horse trading, and that is illegal. That is outright illegal. Not only is it illegal like civilly, it's illegal. They should be prosecuted for that, and the judges knows that it happens. The prosecutors and the defense attorneys. And I had a professor who was a defense attorney, and I asked him. I said, you know, "How prevalent is this?" I was like, "Is this really the case?" And he goes, "Yes. If you want to be a defense attorney in the United States," he said, "you have to be okay with that." And I told him, I said, "Well, what if I'm not okay with that? And what if I stand up and try to fight back against this?" And he goes, "You think you'll be doing good, but ultimately you're just going to hurt every last one of your clients, because there's attorneys that come along and try to do this, and the, you know, prosecutors and the judges make them pay." And I get it that, you know, if you're an individual defense attorney, it's kind of hard to stand up and say, "No, I'm going to fight the system," because then you're going to make all of your clients pay. But these defense attorneys know that it's going on. So even in one area, if 10 defense attorneys got together and said, no, we're taking these cases to trial, and you started holding the judges and the prosecutors and the police accountable, guess what? Things would change. And I know a lot of people hearing this will say, well, who cares? We just want to see people go to prison, so that things, people are deterred and whatnot. And this is the irony of it, is that you can't expect individuals to hold themselves accountable if the system will not hold themselves accountable either. And when that happens, the system has to rely on force. And whenever the system has to rely on force, you've already lost and things start to crumble. If you had judges and prosecutors and police officers that held themselves accountable and lived by the law, believed in the law, and didn't break the law, through that accountability, they would do more to deter crime, and that's ruling through power, than they would through the entire use of force. So that's the part that gets me where, I'm okay with accepting responsibility for what I did. I hold myself accountable. I am brutally honest with myself. And I'm brutally honest with myself because even though there might have been external circumstances that were contributing factors, ultimately I am the determining factor. And I will never allow the criminal justice system to have any sort of sway over me again. So the only way that I can do that is by focusing on myself and having, radical acceptance and radical accountability. I'm okay with doing that.
Sure.
But what gets me is you're going to sit there and be a judge, a police officer, and a prosecutor, and you don't hold yourself accountable? And you really expect other people to hold yourself accountable? Like the whole Sackler judgment that just came out. Okay, great, they gave up $7 billion. But how many people have died as a result of this wealthy scumbag piece of shit family wanting to make billions of dollars? And how many people are still dying as a result of their actions? And all they had to do was give up money and they're still immensely wealthy. And yet you did 12 years at what, 22 years old, 24 years old?
Explain to the people about the Sackler.
Yeah, so it just came out. They finally settled where they have to give up $7 billion. And I believe they have to give up control over Purdue Pharmacy for their contribution to the opioid epidemic.
Exactly.
And the thing that gets me is, it's like, look, I don't believe that prisons deter. I don't believe that prisons will ever in any way have an impact on the drug problem. I don't believe that at all. But the reality is that how many people have died as a result of their greed? And there are grieving people. And even though the Sacklers going to prison isn't going to give them the sort of healing that they need, at least it's a fucking step in the right direction. There are so many mothers out there who have protested and done so much because they've lost their children to the opioid epidemic. So
you paid your debt to society for the wrongs that you done.
And I'm okay with that.
In prison.
Yeah.
In prison. But wouldn't it have mattered if you had billions of dollars like them?
No, it wouldn't. I mean, no, it would have had a completely different.
Would you have been able to get out of it and not do time? Because
I don't
you
know
had
about
that much money like they did? Because essentially they were really drug dealers. They were selling drugs to these doctors that administered them, right? They were drug dealers. They were bigger drug dealers than anyone in the fucking world.
They were pushers. They weren't dealers. Dealers are you come to me.
Thank you.
A pusher is I'm going to you. They were pushers. That's even worse. Yeah.
They were pushers. They were the biggest pushers in the world.
Yep.
In the world.
They created an epidemic.
And they're still making billions of dollars. But yet, that little guy, and I keep saying this, the little guy, the people who vote for this politician or that politician, where the politician is actually taking the money from those big pushes from pharmaceutical that had pushed this drug, it was okay for them to do it. And in the end, it took how many years to pay what?
Yeah.
But they made all that money and then some. Oh, well, we'll give them billions, we'll make it look good or whatever. But we still made billions.
Well, the thing of it is that the prosecutors and the DEA agents that were involved in that case, they wanted people in Purdue to go to prison. And so they didn't go to prison. It would be one thing if the prosecutors and the DA agents...
the agents that are involved, like I said earlier to a guy, the agents, they have no authority to say how much time you're going to get and you're going to prison, you're this, you're there. They don't make that.
Oh, no, I know that. But what I'm saying is that if it would be one thing if the DEA and the prosecutors said, we don't have enough evidence for someone to be prosecuted to where they go to prison. It would be one thing you could look at the decision and say, okay, there wasn't anything to really prosecute on because there wasn't direct evidence. They couldn't have made the case. But from what I understand and what I've read, the prosecutors and the DEA agents were saying, no, there is enough evidence where you could get a conviction. There is enough evidence where someone should go to prison on this. So that's the part that makes it really, really upsetting.
Well, there were a lot of doctors that lost their licenses, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. And some, I believe, did go to prison.
And to me, it's not just the impact of how many people have died as a result of their actions. It's what have you done to the reputation of the criminal system as a result of sending the message that if you have enough money, you don't have to go to prison. So now and I called it the criminal system on purpose because it's not about justice. Justice is we are going to enforce these laws for the betterment of society. And justice is looking at the impact of these laws and saying, hey, is this really deterring people from drug use? And if it's not deterring people from drug use, then we need to take all of this money, all of this energy, and we need to direct it elsewhere. Because the ultimate goal is not for people to end up in prison. The ultimate goal is for fewer people to use drugs. And if throwing people in prison is not resulting in fewer people using drugs, then there is no justification for the mass incarceration. And I say this all the time. America is addicted to drugs, and America is addicted to the war on drugs. If you look at what an addiction is a Band-Aid solution for some underlying problem that you don't know how to deal with. And even though it's not effectively dealing with that underlying trauma, that underlying problem, you don't know how to do anything else. And so it's the only solution you have. So you keep doing it over and over and over again. The war on drugs is our addiction.
So let me just say something to what you're expressing. I remember years ago, prior to me going to prison, 60 Minutes did a news thing about it. Program, and they got a guy, the DEA did. They got a guy that was driving a trailer truck load of cocaine, 45-foot trailer truck full of cocaine, kilos. And they got the tip from an informant. They pulled that truck over. Holy behold, they got the guy on the ground, the driver. They opened up the back. Full of kilos, cocaine, okay? And the shipment came from Venezuela, by the way. Mm-hmm. And they went to Venezuela and talked to the Venezuelans down there. They didn't give a shit. Yeah, we sell them all the time. We sell it to them all the time. Who did you sell it to? We sold it to the CIA. Mm-hmm. When they pulled that driver out of that truck, he started screaming, I'm CIA. I'm CIA. Of course, the DEA didn't let him go until they found out. And then they found out the guy was CIA. So now 60 Minutes comes in, and they say they go to the head of the CIA, what are you doing bringing drugs into the United States like this? Kilos of cocaine into the United States. You're importing cocaine to distribute on the streets of the United States. It's 60 Minutes now.
Yep.
They say, we don't want to talk about it. And they say, you don't want to talk about it? So it looks like you're trying to set up people with the cocaine that you want to sell cocaine to people and set them up. Well, that's a sting operation. Isn't that illegal?
Entrapment.
Isn't that entrapment?
Yep.
But yet you're doing this for what? For what? A, to either make money, and B, to justify your job in the United States government.
Yep.
This is how corrupt this shit is. So if you look, these people, when they hear about guys like yourself or myself, that what we've done, it's nothing compared to what these people have done.
Yep.
Nothing. Nothing. We got nothing on these people. If you want to talk about gangsters, you weren't a gangster, I was a gangster, okay, fine. If you want to talk about gangsters, they're the real gangsters. They are the real gangsters. You are correct to your point.
Yeah. We're the gladiators in the Coliseum. We're the blood sport to distract.
Yeah, we are.
Is what we are.
Well, they're all sitting up there watching, and they're laughing.
Yep. I was in Baton Rouge with Roger Reeves and Barry Seal's son, Aaron Seal, and we stood at his assassination site, and Aaron Seal said that it is 100% confirmed that when his father, Barry Seal, was assassinated, he had George Bush's direct line to the White House in his pocket. That was 100% confirmed. That is factual. He told us that it was a state investigation scene, in that the feds showed up almost immediately, and that they went to the trunk of his father's car and they took out all of his files. He said his father always had his files on him. And someone asked the lead state investigator, and they said, well, why didn't you stop them? You know what I mean? It wasn't their crime scene. That was, your evidence, your crime scene. And he said the only way to possibly have stopped them would have been to pull guns out on them. That's how determined they were. And even if we pulled guns out on them, he said, I don't even think they would have stopped right then and there. So why is it that the feds showed up that quickly, pulled those documents out of his trunk? Come on now. And then another thing.
The documents were worth more than his life.
They painted the story. And then Aaron, we went to his father's gravesite, and his son, Aaron, told us a story about how he found a quarter on his father's gravesite. And he was puzzled by it for years. And then he spoke to someone who was in the military and said that that's a tradition that military people do if they're there at the time of someone's death. So that was someone who was in the military, witnessed his death. So come on now, who was it? The feds were watching him because that he was working with the CIA. And it's just, but you know what though? I'll be honest with you though. I don't blame the government. I blame the people, because ultimately it's on us to say, we will not accept this anymore. This is not okay. If you want to hold us accountable to these laws, that's fine, but we're going to hold you accountable to the same laws. I mean, you just had all of these protests here in LA and across the country. I mean, let's not even talk about politics, but the whole point is you had all these people that were willing to protest for something that they were saying, we're not okay with this. But yet, was there one protest when the whole Sackler decision came out that all they had to do was pay money, and that no one would be going to prison to pay for the possibly millions of lives that they contributed to, the deaths of millions of people, and nobody protested? So ultimately, we can complain about the government as much as we like, but the government will always do what we allow them to do. And ultimately, it's our fault for not standing up and saying, we're not okay with this. We will not accept this anymore. The war on drugs, we are not okay with us. It's not doing anything to save people's lives. And that's, a lot of people, when I start to speak out about criminal justice issues, they'll say, oh, you're not holding yourself accountable. You're not holding yourself accountable. And the reality is that I am holding myself accountable. And I want to see fewer people use drugs is ultimately what my intention is.
You did your time.
Well, it's not, well, I did my time.
You paid your time. We'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is I have learned firsthand of how ineffective the criminal system is at stopping people from using drugs. And I know from firsthand experience that if we are going to have any sort of dent on the drug problem in the United States, we have to change course and we have to do something else. So I'm not trying to, not hold myself accountable. I'm just trying to speak about the ineffectiveness of the system, both in deterring drug use and then also even, deterring criminal behavior. You go to prison, there's no incentive in there to not be a criminal anymore. If anything, you're in a social environment that just reinforces your criminal identity.
Yeah, and you're there to survive.
You're there to survive, and if you do want to continue in your criminal career, you're going to meet the best opportunities in your life.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. So my issues with the criminal justice system is that there are people's lives on the line, and it is ineffective. So if you really want to save people's lives, if you really want to see a positive impact, and you really want to see fewer people use drugs, the first step is to admit this is not working. And we might not know what the solution is, but we're never going to arrive at a truly effective solution if we don't first admit that what we're doing right now is not working. And that's why I say that America has an addiction to the war on drugs, because the evidence is there that it's not working, but yet we refuse to admit.
So real quick, I don't want to get off base here, but real quick, because I want to get back to your story and your life and all that good stuff. But do you think the fentanyl that's being made by China, do you think that's like kind of like the Trojan horse?
Yeah, I mean,
for the United States?
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
to weaken us?
You can fight.
To weaken our people?
You can fight battles with force, and you can fight battles with power. And ultimately, power is more effective. And so dividing us, putting all these different narratives on social media, feeding fentanyl, through the Mexican cartels into the United States, having more and more people die from drug overdoses, that's fighting a war with power. And, everybody, the whole thing that just happened with Iran, and, we have the strongest fighting force in the world. I won't argue with that. We do have the strongest fighting force in the world, but America is losing its power. And if we don't stop and we don't start to focus on how we're not a powerful country anymore, we're going to go down to the wayside. And it's the same thing with the criminal justice system. We try to focus on making it law enforcement rather than law empowerment, and that's the reason why it's so ineffective.
The reason why I asked that is because of what's happening now, and how the president is trying to stop the fentanyl and all that. And I totally agree with him, because I just know that our adversaries to the United States are trying to ruin us, and they're trying to flood everything they can in with that fentanyl. I mean, listen, if you said to me, Johnny, you sell fentanyl, you can make a lot of money, I'd tell you to go fuck yourself.
Yeah, never.
I sold cocaine, yes, I get it, but back in the day, it was like a party drug, a weekend partier, and all that stuff. But to see what these people are now today on with this fentanyl and the opioids and stuff, the way they're nodding out in the street, and just the way they're deteriorated with taking this stuff, it's horrible. And listen, and I know anybody that has done time or anything, stood up and everything, would say, yeah, he's right, man, he's right. So I just think that a foreign government is trying to wreck the United States by doing that. And that's the Trojan horse. And that's what I call that. Every time I hear about fentanyl, I call it the Trojan horse.
I know. And if we don't admit that what we're currently doing is ineffective, they're going to have their way with us. Is ultimately, to me, what is most disturbing. So as long as there is a demand, there will always be a supply. Law enforcement will never impact the demand. You cannot treat a problem of power with force. You just can't do it. And I'll be honest with you, I think it's unfair to even expect police officers to have an impact on drug use. They don't have the ability, and it does not matter how much of the supply you eliminate, there will always be a supply to take its place. And we learned that.
It's like alcohol, right? I mean, people drink alcohol all the time, and alcohol is being sold everywhere and anywhere, if you will, whether it's in a bar or at a liquor store or whatever. And people, they become addicts off of it.
Yeah.
But it's in a way similar to that down the road, if you will. But yeah, I mean, not every law enforcement can, even they drink. I mean, hello, because it's legal, right? And people want to have good spirits and fun in their lives, but the thing is that you have to be able to not overindulge, right? And to make sure that you maintain a good life for yourself and not hurt yourself. But you can't do that with fentanyl. There's no fucking way you do that with fentanyl. No way. Any of that shit.
Yeah.
But I want to get back to you. I want to get back into you and how you were arrested and why and it's funny because I know that you were one of the most wanted in California at one time. They wanted you. And they were looking for you. How long were you on the run for?
3 years. Northern California is top 10 most wanted.
Top 10.
It was the U.S. Marshal who was after me, had a hard-on for me for whatever reason. And he came up with the idea for the Northern California top 10 most wanted list. And he did it to get more money and more agents to try to find me. And so there was a big, announcement in the Bay Area about, this list just came out offering awards, whatnot. And so the first top 10 criminals that were on there, I was one of them. And it was me, 6 murderers, and the 3 guys who escaped from Alcatraz. And there was actually a lot of phone calls into the local news station saying, what in the hell is this guy doing on this list? It was 109 pounds of marijuana, which back then, I mean, even to this day, 109 pounds is not a lot. But, that had nothing to do with how big of a criminal I was, how bad of a criminal I was. That was everything to do with that U.S. Marshal's ego.
An overzealous person.
Yeah, it was an overzealous person. He would go.
Could you imagine a person being able to have that type of power, being overzealous that much? There's got to be some type of regulation.
Well, the whole point though is, okay,
if you're a law-abiding person, in which you're supposed to be, there has to be, your feelings cannot make you be overzealous. Even if you want to be, there has to be some type of regulation, if you will.
He implied to my mother, who has Parkinson's, she's disabled. I don't know how anyone could be mean to my mother, but he implied to her very, very strongly on numerous occasions that if she didn't tell him where I was, that when he found me in the field, he was going to kill me. So he
actually used those words?
He implied it very, very strongly.
Implied it.
My mother does not exaggerate. My mother is a very honest woman. You can say whatever you want to say about me.
He implied that.
But when my mother told me about the conversation, how he said, in the field, things happen, fingers slip, you know what I mean? Guns go off, people end up dead. He's like, I'd really, really hate for that to happen to your son. He's like, I can't guarantee it. It's pretty, good chance that it's going to happen. But if you tell me where he's at, then I can guarantee that it won't happen. And she didn't know where I was. I didn't speak to her for 3 years.
What a scumbag tactic. I call that a scumbag.
Oh yeah.
I call that a rat. You're threatening an older woman who's ailing.
You're going to kill her son for 109 pounds of marijuana.
You're insinuating that your son could be killed and might be killed. Can't guarantee it if you don't tell us. Nice guy, huh? That's a nice guy.
Told my sister that she was going to be arrested and thrown in prison and that her kids would be thrown in child protective services and told my brother-in-law that he would be deported back to Ireland. And they had no idea where I was. And, a lot of people have said, oh, well, that was your fault. You should have you should have turned yourself in when you knew that they were going through that. And, I can somewhat see that argument, but I'm responsible for my actions, and that marshal is responsible for his actions. Regardless of what I was doing, it was his decision to do what I think is breaking the law in order to try to catch me. So, yes, I'm responsible for my actions. I can claim that. But I'm not the only one who's responsible for my actions. If I'm responsible for my actions, then so too is everyone else. So it is his fault and his responsibility that he chose to go to such lengths in order to try to catch me. So that's the part that upsets me about the double standard when it comes to the criminal justice system. Is that
the problem is that these people in law enforcement, whether it's a prosecutor or an agent, they'll go to all extents.
I know.
And that means lying and threatening and stuff like that. They'll even have a rat that they know and use that rat to help them out to, even lie and whatever it might be. This is how bad it is.
Yep.
This is how bad it is. As a matter of fact, I know law enforcement people that had rats on their, I guess, payroll, if you will, because they pay them too to be on their program with them. I know for a fact that they were giving them drugs to support their habits. I know this.
Yeah. Well, I've seen them keep them on drugs so that they know that they can get drugs.
It's amazing
from them.
and yet the public doesn't know this.
Yeah.
They don't know that.
Well, I tell you what,
because they have never been through it.
Witnessing all of that is what made me come to a point and say, okay, what do I have to do inside of myself so that I never make these decisions again, so that those people can have any sort of power over me again?
Exactly.
And like I said, I don't agree with what they've done, but ultimately, even if they are corrupt, even if they are breaking the law, that was still just a contributing factor. And ultimately, I was the determining factor.
In changing your life.
Yeah, and so like I said, I would love to be a part about criminal justice reform, but I think the more powerful message is actually speaking to individuals and saying, look, it doesn't matter what obstacles there are in the outside world. It doesn't matter what you're encountering. If you focus on yourself and you believe in yourself, you will discover and create whatever power it is you need to live a happy and successful life. And so ultimately, that's my message to individuals, is that forget the contributing factors of the external world. If you just focus on your inner self and your inner strength and the choices and the true power that you have, you can overcome anything.
Well, you are doing that now in this podcast, or this show, I should say. You are doing that, and you're giving that message now. So we are doing that, both of us, to help people understand that the deck is stacked against them and you're not going to win. And you're doing a great job at that. But I know that you changed your life around. Quickly tell me about that, and tell me, what advice would you give people in life through the adversities that you've been through?
There's a couple of things. My experience, the most powerful thing was realizing that you can't be dependent upon anything in the external world for your belief about yourself. And it's, a lot of people describe it, they call it a dark night of the soul. And when you go through a dark night of the soul, you experience what they call total annihilation. You are stripped of everything. You are just laid bare by the universe. And I'm not religious. I have no idea what I believe about God. I'm okay with that. I think things will always be uncertain. But they say when you go through that dark night of the soul that you come in contact with the Creator. And what I've come to realize is that when you are laid bare and stripped of everything, there's one thing left, and it's your choice. And you might not have a reason to love yourself. There might not be any external justification to love yourself, but you can still choose to love yourself. And that is the core moment where you stop being a creation and you start being a creator, and you take full control of your life and you say, I choose to love myself. And once you choose to love yourself and you're doing it from a place of creation and like true power, then everything you build on top of that is truly yours, and it can never be taken away from you.
I have to say, I totally agree. So what advice would you give someone today?
If there's something you're scared of doing, even I'm talking about the shadow work, you know what I mean, the personal work, just jump in, just do it. That fire is right in front of you. I get it. You don't want to jump in because the fire burns. But once you get into that fire, the one thing you start to understand is that what's being burned away are the impurities of you, and it's not actually affecting you. I was on the run for 3 years because I was scared to jump into that fire. I was scared to face the reality of myself. And the irony is that the one thing in life that you are scared to do more than anything, that is the one thing that you have to do if you want to take it to the next level. So whatever it is, that shadow work that you're scared to do, that burning, blazing inferno that's right in front of you that you're scared to jump into, just fucking do it.
Amen. And let me tell you, Bryan, thank you for coming on. You're amazing. You're intelligent. People need to listen to you more. I mean, really, you're fantastic, and you have a lot to give to society, and a lot of information, a lot of intelligence, and deterrence for people.
Well, I'm here because I see the exact same thing in you, Red. So it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on, Bryan.
Absolutely.
I love you, brother.
Love you too.